Have you ever heard the sound of a whisper that wasn't meant for your ears? Willow Creek was just an ordinary place, quiet and forgotten until the settlers came. They didn't know what lay buried beneath the earth. Something ancient, something hungry. The creek, once clear and calm, began to run red as people vanished, one by one, their names lost to time. The local tribes knew the truth. They tried to warn the settlers with stories of a dark spirit trapped underground, a spirit that fed on the souls of the living. But the settlers didn't listen. Desperate to save his people, their leader, Jonathan Crane, made a deal with the spirit. He promised a blood sacrifice from his family, every generation, binding them to the cursed land forever. From that day on, Willow Creek was no longer just a place. It became a home for shadows, whispers, and unending fear. What if the house you called home wasn't just watching you, but waiting? The tires of my car crunched on the gravel. As I pulled up to Willow Creek Manor, the house stood tall and dark, like a giant shadow against the fading light. Its windows stared back at me, empty and hollow, as if the house itself was alive, waiting for me to step inside. I gripped the old, rusty key in my hand. As I approached the front door, the wind began to whisper through the trees, sending shivers down my spine. It was almost as if someone or something was calling my name. My heart pounded as I pushed the key into the lock. The door resisted, creaking loudly as I turned the key. When it finally groaned open, a rush of cold, stale air hit me, wrapping around me like icy fingers. The door creaked shut behind me, and then I heard it, a soft, breathy whisper, so close it felt like someone was standing right next to me. "Welcome home." I froze. Was it just the wind, or was something here, waiting for me? My hand shook as I reached for the light switch. The bulb flickered on, casting a dim, yellow light across the room. My eyes were drawn to an old, cracked mirror on the wall. For a split second, I saw something in the reflection, a face, with hollow eyes and a mouth twisted in a silent scream. I blinked, and the face was gone, replaced by my own pale reflection. But the image stayed with me, sending a chill down my spine. Then I heard it, a soft, rhythmic tapping, 1 2 3, 1 2 3. It echoed through the house like a slow, steady heartbeat. It wasn't random. It was deliberate, as if something or someone was trying to get my attention. The tapping grew louder, more insistent, pounding in my head. I told myself it was just the house settling, just creaking wood, but deep down, I knew better. This was something else, something alive. The shadows seemed to move on their own as Mrs. Abigail Thorne appeared from the darkness. Her eyes were milky and unfocused, as if she was staring right through me. There was something about her that made the room feel colder, darker. "Dusk gathers where secrets lie," she whispered, her voice dry and brittle like old leaves. "Best not to disturb what sleeps in the walls." Before I could say anything, she turned and melted back into the shadows, leaving behind a chill that sank deep into my bones. The study was thick with dust, the air heavy with the scent of decay. I walked to the large, wooden desk in the center of the room, my fingers leaving trails in the dust. On the desk lay an old, leather-bound ledger, its pages yellowed with age. My hands shook as I opened the book, my breath catching in my throat. Inside were names, hundreds of them written in dark, almost blood-red ink. Each name belonged to someone from my family, each one tied to this cursed house. As I turned the pages, my heart nearly stopped when I saw the last entry. It was my name, written in fresh ink, still wet and glistening. The sight of it made my blood run cold. Suddenly, the tapping in the walls grew louder, echoing like a drumbeat. The shadows in the room seemed to twist and move on their own, closing in around me. The house was alive, and it was angry. I jumped as the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. I turned to see Dr. Marcus Blackwood standing in the doorway, his eyes gleaming with a strange, almost hungry look. "Ah, Evelyn," he said, his voice smooth and unsettling. "These old houses have a way of playing tricks on the mind, don't they?" He stepped closer, glancing at the ledger in my hands. Without asking, he took the book from me and began flipping through the pages. "Quite a history your family has here," he murmured, almost amused. "So many names, so many lives." His words sent a shiver down my spine. There was something about the way he looked at the book, almost like he was enjoying it. He paused by the cracked mirror, his fingers brushing the glass with a strange sort of reverence. "Did you know," he whispered, "that mirrors were once believed to be windows to the soul? To look into a mirror is to see not just your reflection, but your true self." He turned to face me, and for a split second, I saw something dark and twisted in his eyes. But then it was gone, replaced by a polite smile. "Be careful, Evelyn," he said, his voice light and playful. "This house has a way of getting under your skin." As night fell, the house seemed to come alive with a strange, eerie energy. The walls pulsed like they had a heartbeat, the shadows twisting into terrifying shapes. The whispers grew louder, filling my head with a maddening chorus of voices. Desperate for answers, I returned to the study. The ledger sat on the desk, glowing with a dark, almost sinister light. My hands shook as I opened it again, flipping through the pages with growing dread. The names of my ancestors seemed to twist and move on the page, each one a link in a chain that bound me to this cursed place. The ink seemed to shimmer and pulse, as if it were alive, as if it were feeding on my fear. And then, the whispers came together into a single voice, a voice that echoed through my mind, low and menacing. "You are the final link in the chain, Evelyn," it hissed. "The blood of your ancestors binds you to this house. There is no escape." The room spun around me, the walls closing in, the shadows growing darker and more twisted. The house was demanding a sacrifice, and it wouldn't rest until it got what it wanted. Behind the peeling wallpaper, I found a hidden door. It opened onto a narrow staircase that spiraled down into darkness. The air was thick and cold, filled with the smell of damp earth and something, much worse, something ancient and evil. The tapping had stopped, replaced by a slow, steady thumping, like a giant heartbeat coming from deep below. I didn't want to go down there, but something inside me, something dark and powerful, compelled me to move forward. Step by step, I descended into the darkness, the walls closing in around me, the air growing colder with each step. Halfway down, I heard it, a soft, muffled sobbing, coming from somewhere deep within the walls. My heart raced with fear as the sobbing grew louder, more desperate. It sounded like someone was trapped down here, someone who knew I was coming. At the bottom of the stairs, I found a small, dark room. The only light came from a single flickering candle on the far wall. The room was filled with old, dusty books and jars, filled with things I didn't want to think about. In the center of the room, sitting on the cold stone floor, was a young woman. Her hair was tangled, her clothes stained with blood. She was rocking back and forth, her sobbing the only sound in the oppressive silence. "Lily," I whispered, my voice trembling. She lifted her head and I gasped. It was her, my sister, the one who disappeared all those years ago. But she wasn't the girl I remembered. Her eyes were hollow, her skin pale and translucent, showing dark veins that pulsed beneath the surface. Her mouth moved, but the voice that came out wasn't hers. "Help me," she whispered, her voice a chorus of the damned. "Please, help me." In the corner of the room, I saw it, the mirror. It was large, old and cracked, its surface gleaming with an eerie light. Lily pointed to it, her hollow eyes filled with desperation. "You have to destroy it," she said, her voice trembling. "It's the source of the curse. You have to break it." I stepped toward the mirror, my heart pounding in my chest. The shadows seemed to close in around me, the air growing colder, thicker, almost suffocating. But I couldn't stop. I had to end this. I raised my hand, ready to shatter the glass. But then a voice, a soft, insidious whisper echoed in the back of my mind. "Are you sure?" it asked, its tone soothing, almost comforting. "Are you sure this is the right choice? What if she's lying? What if this is all a trick?" Doubt filled my mind, twisting around my heart like a vice. What if breaking the mirror only made things worse? What if this was all part of the house's plan, a final cruel joke to trap me here forever? I hesitated, my hand hovering over the glass. The voice grew louder, more insistent, feeding on my fear. "Think, Evelyn," it whispered, "what if you're wrong? What if breaking the mirror seals your fate? What if the curse is you?" My mind was spinning, the world around me collapsing into chaos. The shadows were closing in, the heartbeat pounding in my ears, the whispers a chorus of madness. I didn't know what to believe anymore. What was real and what wasn't. All I knew was that I was running out of time. I looked at Lily, her hollow eyes filled with desperation. "Please," she begged, her voice breaking. "You have to trust me." But could I trust her? Or was this just another trick, another part of the house's twisted game? The mirror pulsed under my hand, its surface rippling like water. My reflection stared back at me, its eyes filled with terror. And I realized, with a cold, sinking dread, that the choice was mine. Whatever I did next would determine my fate, and there was no going back. "Do it, Evelyn," Lily pleaded. "Destroy the mirror, end the curse." My heart raced, my mind screaming in confusion. The shadows were closing in, the whispers louder than ever, the house itself trembling with anticipation. I knew I had to make a choice, but the fear, the doubt, it was paralyzing me, trapping me in this nightmare. And then, in the midst of the chaos, I remembered something my grandmother had told me all those years ago, just before she died. "Willow Creek Manor is a place of choices," she had said, her voice weak but filled with a strange conviction. "But remember this, Evelyn, sometimes the right choice is the one you're most afraid to make." The memory cut through the madness, bringing with it a moment of clarity. I knew what I had to do, even if it terrified me, even if it meant sacrificing everything. I took a deep breath, steeling myself, and with a final surge of resolve, I raised my hand and the mirror exploded into 1,000 shards of glass, each piece catching the light in a brilliant flash. The sound was deafening, a high-pitched scream that reverberated through the room, through the walls, through the very heart of the house. For a moment, everything was still, silent, as if the world itself was holding its breath. And then the shadows began to writhe, twisting and convulsing as if in agony. The walls buckled and cracked, the floor beneath me shuddering violently. The heartbeat faltered, growing weaker, more erratic, until it was nothing more than a faint, desperate thump. The whispers died away, replaced by a deep, guttural groan that echoed through the manor. The house was coming apart, unraveling at the seams, and I could feel its grip on me loosening, its power waning. Lily's form began to fade, her body dissolving into the air like smoke. She smiled at me, a sad, grateful smile, and I could see the relief in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You did it. You saved us." I wanted to reach out to her, to hold on to her, but she was already gone, disappearing into the ether. The room around me was collapsing, the walls crumbling, the ceiling caving in. I knew I had to get out, but my legs felt like lead, my body heavy with exhaustion. I staggered toward the door, the floor beneath me shifting and cracking with each step. The house was falling apart, the curse breaking, and I knew that if I didn't get out now, I'd be buried here forever. I burst through the door just as the ceiling collapsed behind me, the force of the explosion throwing me to the ground. I crawled through the rubble, my lungs burning, my vision blurred, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. I reached the front door and threw it open, stumbling out into the cool night air. I collapsed on the ground, gasping for breath, my body trembling with the aftershocks of the nightmare I had just survived. Behind me, Willow Creek Manor groaned and shuddered, one last time before it collapsed in on itself, the ancient walls crumbling to dust, the curse finally broken. As the sun began to rise, casting a golden light over the ruins of Willow Creek Manor, I stood at the edge of the rubble, my body bruised and battered, but alive. The house was gone, reduced to nothing more than a pile of stones and ash. The curse lifted, but as I turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of something in the corner of my eye, a figure standing among the ruins, watching me. It was Mrs. Thorne. She smiled at me, a smile that didn't reach her eyes, and for a moment, I felt a chill run down my spine. She stepped forward, her presence as unsettling as ever. "You've made your choice, dear," she said, her voice calm, almost serene. "But the house always wins." Before I could respond, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the mist that hung over the ruins. The words echoed in my mind, a final, chilling reminder that even though the house was gone, its legacy lived on. The screen fades to black, but just before it does, there's a split-second image of a door slightly ajar, a sliver of otherworldly light spilling through the crack. The sound of tapping, faint and rhythmic, echoes in the distance. A voice, low and intimate, speaks over the darkness. "You've witnessed the tale of Willow Creek Manor, but have you truly grasped its implications? The choice I made, the horrors I faced, they're not confined to the realm of fiction. No, they lurk in the shadows of your own world, in the quiet corners of your mind." The camera slowly pans across a dimly lit room, settling on a figure sitting in a weathered armchair. The figure leans forward, their face partially obscured by shadows. Think about it. How many times have you felt a presence in an empty room, heard a whisper in the silence, seen a flicker of movement just at the edge of your vision? These aren't mere flights of fancy. They're cracks in the facade of reality, glimpses of the truths we desperately try to ignore. The camera zooms in slightly, revealing more of the figure's face, though it remains shrouded in darkness. The boundary between our world and the realm of nightmares is far more fragile than we'd like to believe. Willow Creek Manor isn't just a house, it's a state of mind, a gateway. And now that you've peered through that gateway, can you ever truly close it? The figure's smile widens, though it doesn't reach their eyes. I invite you to join us, the haunted. Subscribe to Haunting Chapters, and with each new tale, we'll venture deeper into the abyss of human fear and cosmic horror. Together, we'll explore the darkest corners of existence, challenging everything you thought you knew about reality. The figure leans back, their face momentarily illuminated. It's unclear if it's the protagonist from the story or someone else entirely. Before you go, a word of caution. Our next tale delves into the concept of inherited trauma and generational curses. Ask yourself, what sins of your ancestors might be sleeping in your blood, waiting to awaken? The figure's expression shifts to something more sinister, a look that suggests they know more than they're letting on. Sleep well, dear viewer. And remember, when you hear that tapping in the night, it might just be Willow Creek Manor calling you home. The screen fades to black, but the sound of tapping continues, growing louder, more insistent, until it feels like it's coming from inside the viewer's own room.